My parents told me there wouldn't be enough space for me at the annual family retreat. Then they invited 118 people, all 6 of my siblings. Their families, in-laws, even cousins and friends. I didn't say a word. I took action instead. 9 hours later, my mum was screaming. The downtown coffee shop had that perfect afternoon energy when Sage walked through the glass doors. Her vintage leather messenger bag bouncing against her hip and her laptop clutched against her chest like a shield. I watched her scan the room, her eyes moving methodically from table to table, until she spotted me in our usual corner booth. Her face lit up with that particular smile freelance writers get when they're about to dive into a story they know will be worth telling. She navigated through the crowded space with practiced grace, stepping around a businessman hunched over his phone, sidestepping a woman wrestling with a double stroller, and pausing to let a barista carrying a tray of iced drinks pass by. When she finally slid into the booth across from me, she was slightly out of breath but radiating excitement. "Bailey, I'm so sorry I'm running late," she said, immediately pulling out her digital recorder and setting it on the scarred wooden table between us. The device looked expensive and professional, all sleek black metal and glowing indicators. The subway was a nightmare. Then I spent 10 minutes circling the block looking for parking that wouldn't cost me my firstborn child. I smiled, wrapping my hands around my coffee mug for warmth and comfort. No worries. I've been people watching anyway. There's this couple by the window who've been having the same argument about their vacation plans for 20 minutes. It's like performance art. Sage laughed, the kind of genuine laugh that reminded me why we'd become friends in the first place. She had this way of making everything feel a little lighter, a little more manageable. "Speaking of performance," she said, opening her laptop and pulling up a document that was clearly well-researched and thoroughly outlined. "I wanted to talk to you about this piece I'm working on." "The family dynamics thing, right?" I asked, though my stomach was already starting to tighten with that familiar anxiety that came whenever someone wanted to dig into my personal life. "Exactly." Sage adjusted the recorder so it was positioned between us like a small confession booth. "I'm writing this feature for Modern Family magazine about how traditional family structures are evolving in the digital age. You know how social media is changing the way we connect and disconnect from our relatives. How younger generations are redefining what family loyalty means, that sort of thing." I nodded, though I could feel my guard going up. My comedy sets were one thing. They were performed pieces, crafted and polished, and safely contained within the boundaries of entertainment. But interviews felt different, more exposed, like someone asking you to strip naked in a room full of strangers. "And you want to talk to me because?" I prompted, though I had a sinking feeling I already knew the answer. Sage leaned forward, her expression growing more serious and focused. "Because your comedy has this incredibly unique perspective on family relationships. The way you talk about feeling like an outsider in your own home, about being the designated audience member while everyone else gets to be the star, it's not just funny. It's deeply moving. And it's incredibly relatable to a huge number of people who feel the same way but don't have the words to express it." She paused, studying my face with that intense journalistic gaze I'd grown to recognize from her other interviews. "I've been to enough of your shows to know that your family material isn't just bits. It's autobiography disguised as punchlines. And I think there's a bigger story there that deserves to be told." My heart started beating faster. That familiar racing sensation I got whenever someone got too close to the truth I kept buried under layers of carefully crafted humor. "I mean," I said carefully, trying to keep my voice light and casual, "growing up in a big family, you're bound to feel lost in the shuffle sometimes. It's pretty universal, right? Birth order psychology and all that." Sage tilted her head and I could practically see her bullshit detector going off. "But it's more than that, isn't it? The specificity of your experiences, the way you describe certain family moments. There's a precision to that pain that suggests it goes much deeper than typical sibling rivalry or middle child syndrome." She'd been to enough of my shows, heard enough of my material to recognize the difference between universal family humor and something much more personal and painful. The way she said it, gentle but persistent, made me realize she wasn't looking for surface-level quotes or easy sound bites. She wanted the real story, the one I'd been telling in pieces for months without ever saying it all at once. I stared at her recorder, its red light blinking steadily like a mechanical heartbeat, counting down to a confession I wasn't sure I was ready to make. Something about the professional distance of an interview, The fact that this would become a published piece read by strangers who didn't know me made it seem safer to consider saying things I'd never voiced before. "You really want to know what it's like?" I asked, my voice coming out quieter and more vulnerable than I intended. She nodded earnestly. "Only if you're comfortable sharing. But yes, I think your experience could help a lot of people who feel the same way." I looked around the coffee shop, taking in the afternoon crowd that surrounded us like a protective bubble. At the table next to us, a young couple was sharing a slice of chocolate cake and planning their weekend. Near the window, a woman was working on her laptop while her toddler colored in a book, occasionally looking up to show her his progress. Normal people having normal conversations about normal problems that had normal solutions. "Okay," I said, taking a breath that felt bigger than my lungs could handle. "But you have to promise me something. If this gets too heavy, if I start crying or whatever, you can't put that in the article. I don't want to be the tragic comedian crying into her latte." "Deal," Sage said immediately. "This is about your truth, not your tears." I appreciated that. The distinction mattered. "Last month," I began, my voice steady but my hands starting to tremble slightly around my coffee cup, "my parents called me to talk about our annual family retreat. It's this big thing we do every year. Has been for as long as I can remember. Usually it's chaotic and loud and exhausting, but it's also the one time when everyone makes an effort to be together." Sage was already typing notes, her fingers moving quietly across her keyboard. "Sounds nice." "It is, or it was, or it would be if I was actually invited." The words came out sharper than I intended. "They told me there wasn't enough space for me this year. Said they were keeping it small, just immediate family." I paused, watching Sage's eyebrows rise slightly as she processed this information. Then, a week later, I found out they invited 118 people. The typing stopped completely. Sage looked up from her laptop, her expression shifting from professional interest to something that looked like genuine shock. "I'm sorry, what?" 118 people, I repeated, feeling that familiar hollow sensation in my stomach. "My parents, all 6 of my siblings, their partners. Their kids, cousins I haven't seen in years, family friends. Even the in-laws who usually spend these events complaining about having to participate." Sage stared at me for a long moment. "And they told you there wasn't enough space?" "Not enough space," I said, my voice getting tighter with each word. "For one more person. At a retreat with 118 people at a massive lakeside resort that probably could have accommodated half of downtown." The silence stretched between us, filled only by the ambient noise of coffee shop life continuing around our suddenly very serious conversation. I could see Sage's writer brain working, connecting dots, recognizing the story within the story. "How did you find out?" she asked gently. "Instagram stories," I said with a laugh that came out more like a cough. "Because social media is apparently how I get updates on my own family's life now. My sister posted this incredible drone shot of everyone at this gorgeous resort. Color-coordinated outfits, professional photography, laminated name tags. A banner that read, 2025 Annual Family Retreat, like it was a corporate conference." I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the saved screenshots I couldn't bring myself to delete. Want to see the evidence of my own irrelevance? Sage looked at the photos I showed her, her expression growing more troubled with each swipe. Group shots by the lake, candid moments around a campfire. My parents slow dancing under string lights while everyone else watched and smiled. A perfectly curated family memory that I existed in only as the person who wasn't there. "This looks like it took months to plan," she said quietly. "Oh, it did." I laughed, but it sounded bitter even to my own ears. "There were spreadsheets. Someone coordinated those outfits. The logistics alone for 118 people would have required a small army of planning. And somehow, in all of that coordination, in all of those group messages and phone calls and email chains, nobody thought to mention it to me." I could see Sage processing this, her journalistic mind already understanding the deeper implications. "And they told you there wasn't enough space?" "Not enough space," I repeated. That was the exact phrase my mother used. "We're just keeping it small this year, Bailey. Not enough space for everyone." The words tasted like ash in my mouth. Around us, the coffee shop continued its normal rhythm. Someone ordered a complicated drink with 3 different milk alternatives. A group of college students was debating whether to order another round of pastries. Life moving forward while I sat frozen in the memory of being erased from my own family's story. "Bailey," Sage said, her voice careful and measured, "can I ask if this kind of thing has happened before?" That question hit me like a physical blow. Nobody had ever asked me that. Not once in 28 years had anyone wondered if my exclusion was a pattern rather than a series of unfortunate coincidences. I felt the dam I'd built around these memories start to crack, not dramatically, but slowly, like water finding its way through stone. "You want the full list?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She nodded. When I was 10, there was my cousin Sarah's birthday party. 30 kids from school plus family, but somehow mysteriously no room for me. The party was too full. When I was 12, my family went to see my uncle's band play at this festival 2 hours away. Everyone piled into cars for this big family road trip. I found out about it when they posted photos from the concert. I paused, remembering the sting of seeing those photos. Everyone laughing and singing along while I'd spent the weekend alone, wondering where everyone had gone. When I was 15, there was the lake house weekend I mentioned. 2 months of planning in a group chat I wasn't added to. When I was 18, my graduation party was postponed because it conflicted with my sister's recording session. When I was 23, I found out about a family reunion through a Facebook event I wasn't invited to. Sage was staring at me now, her laptop forgotten. "Bailey, and here's the kicker," I continued, feeling momentum build like I was finally letting air out of a balloon that had been overinflated for decades. Last year, I spent an entire weekend helping them prepare for this same retreat. I ironed t-shirts with the family logo. I organised welcome bags. I even helped design the schedule poster using my graphic design skills. I was so proud to be contributing, to be useful, to be part of something. My voice was getting stronger now, fueled by the righteous anger I'd been suppressing. Then I found out I wasn't invited to actually attend the event I'd spent my weekend helping create. I'd literally ironed the shirts that everyone else would wear while bonding and making memories without me. Sage's hand went to her mouth. "Oh my God." "The funny part is," I said, though nothing about this felt funny anymore, I kept hoping. Every single time I thought maybe this time would be different. Maybe they just forgot to mention it to me. Maybe the invitation got lost. Maybe I misunderstood. I looked down at my hands, surprised to find them clenched into fists. I was 28 years old, sitting in my apartment eating leftover Chinese food, still hoping my family would remember to include me in their life. Still believing that maybe, just maybe, I mattered enough to warrant a phone call. The tears I'd been holding back started to fall then. Not dramatically, just quietly sliding down my cheeks like they'd been waiting for permission to exist. "Bailey," Sage said softly, "what you're describing isn't just family dysfunction. It's systematic exclusion. It's emotional abandonment. Hearing someone else name it, put clinical words to the shapeless hurt I'd been carrying, felt like being handed a map to a place I'd been lost in for years." "And the comedy?" she asked. "How did you get from there to the stage?" I wiped my eyes with my napkin, leaving streaks of mascara that I didn't care about anymore. "It started as survival, honestly. If I could make other people laugh about being left out, maybe it would stop hurting so much. Maybe I could transform all that rejection into something useful, something valuable." I paused, remembering those first nervous nights at open mic events, the way my hands would shake as I approached the microphone. But then something incredible happened. When I got on stage and told jokes about being the forgotten child, about being tone deaf in a family of musicians, about being the designated audience member in my own home, hundreds of strangers started laughing. Not pity laughing, not polite laughing, but real, genuine, surprised laughter. Sage was leaning forward now, completely absorbed in my story. "And I realized something revolutionary," I continued, feeling energy build in my voice. "Maybe the problem was never that I wasn't funny. Maybe the problem was that I wasn't their kind of funny. Maybe the problem was that they never bothered to listen long enough to understand my sense of humor." "That's incredible," Sage said. "You essentially had to leave your family to find your voice." "Yeah," I said, the full weight of that truth settling over me. "And the crazy part is, now that I've found it, I can't imagine giving it up. Not for them, not for anyone." Sage closed her laptop slowly, deliberately. "Bailey, I have to tell you, this isn't just a story about modern family dynamics anymore. This is about finding your authentic self when the people who should support you most are actively trying to suppress it. This is about what happens when creative people refuse to be silenced by the people whose approval they've been seeking their whole lives." "Yeah," I said, feeling something fundamental shift inside my chest, like a door I'd been pushing against for years suddenly swinging open. "I think you're right." For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt truly seen. Not judged, not dismissed, not made invisible. but witnessed in my full, complicated, messy truth. It was both terrifying and liberating how much that simple recognition meant to me. How starved I'd been for someone to listen to my story without immediately trying to fix it or dismiss it or explain it away. As Sage packed up her equipment, she paused and looked at me with something that felt like respect. You know, Bailey, what happened to you isn't just a personal story. It's a universal story about belonging, about creative expression, about what happens when the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally put conditions on that love. I nodded, unable to speak around the emotion rising in my throat. And it's a story about what happens when someone finally finds the courage to stop asking for permission to exist and starts demanding the space they deserve. I didn't go straight home after the interview. Instead, I found myself driving slowly through my old neighborhood, past the tree-lined streets where I'd learned to ride a bike, past the park where I'd spent countless afternoons pretending to be happy while my siblings performed impromptu concerts for whoever would listen. Eventually, I pulled up across the street from the house where I grew up, a two-story colonial with cream-colored siding and black shutters that my mother repainted every other year like clockwork. The front lawn was perfectly manicured, the garden beds bursting with seasonal flowers arranged in patterns that suggested both artistic vision and obsessive control. A wraparound porch stretched across the front of the house, the same porch where we'd held those mandatory family talent shows every summer, where I'd sat in the audience watching my siblings shine while I tried to become invisible. The house looked exactly the same, frozen in time like a museum dedicated to the family I'd never quite belonged to. I could see the living room windows where countless family meetings had taken place around that massive mahogany dining table, where decisions about my life were made without my input, where conversations about family events happened in my absence. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, engine running, heat blasting, just staring at the building that had shaped me in ways I was still discovering. Every window held memories. The kitchen where my mother would assign tasks for family events I wouldn't be invited to attend. The den where my siblings would practice their music while I was told to play quietly somewhere else. My old bedroom window on the second floor, where I'd spent countless nights wondering what was wrong with me, why I couldn't seem to fit into the family I'd been born into. My phone buzzed with a text from Sage. Thank you for trusting me with your story today. I have a feeling this piece is going to help a lot of people feel less alone in their own families. You're braver than you know? I stared at the message for a long time before typing back. Thank you for asking the questions nobody else ever thought to ask. For seeing me when my own family couldn't. She responded immediately. They didn't fail to see you, Bailey. They chose not to. There's a difference, and it's important that you know that. Those words hit me like a revelation. All these years, I'd been operating under the assumption that my family's treatment of me was somehow my fault, that if I could just be funnier, more musical, more entertaining, more whatever they needed me to be, then maybe I'd earn my place at their table. But sitting there in my car, looking at the house where I'd spent 18 years learning to make myself smaller, I realized Sage was right. This wasn't about my inadequacy. This was about their choice. They had chosen over and over again to exclude me. They had chosen to plan events without me, to create group chats that didn't include my name, to organize family memories that had no space for me in them. As I drove away from my childhood home toward my downtown apartment, toward the life I'd built with my own hands and my own voice, I felt something shift inside me. Not just in how I saw my family's treatment of me, but in how I saw my own worth. For 28 years, I'd been trying to earn a place at a table where no chair had ever been set for me, where the seating arrangement was decided before I was even born. I'd been begging for scraps from people who viewed my hunger as an inconvenience rather than a tragedy. Maybe it was time to stop asking for permission to exist in my own family's story. Maybe it was time to start writing a story where I was the protagonist instead of the forgotten footnote. I parked outside my apartment building and sat for another moment, feeling the weight of possibility settling around me like a new coat. Tomorrow I had a show at the comedy club. People would come specifically to hear what I had to say, to laugh at observations that my family had dismissed for decades. For the first time in months, I felt excited about what came next instead of anxious about what I'd been left out of. For the first time in my life, I felt like the author of my own story instead of a character someone else had forgotten to write in.